A question asked very often is infertility Parsi-centric? No, there is no evidence that corroborates that.
Before marriage itself, I knew once I got married I wanted a baby. But my husband was a bit skeptical, but I convinced him and he went along with me.
God has given a very strong instinct of reproduction and self-preservation.
For me, a marriage was not complete without a child. I was more keen on a baby than my husband. When she gave me my child in my hands, my son, for the first time, believe me, I just couldn't believe he's mine. I just couldn't believe he's mine.
Being a mother myself, I think that has been my calling since I was a kid. I mean, there are my cousins who said that you were like 7 years old, 8 years old, you would only play mummy, you know. But it's a journey worth taking because the experience, the enjoyment, the fun that you have, bringing up an individual in the world is something only when you take it, when you go through the journey, you can experience it. It's like the mango cow, like you eat a mango. You will only know how sweet or sour the mango is once you eat it. So that's exactly what parenthood is all about.
I had read the advertisement of Geo-Parsi in Jame Jamshed. As scheduled, we visited Dadar, the place which was given to us. Whatever doubts we had, that all got clarified, and within minutes we had decided that we were in that program. And today, by the grace of God, we will definitely become a parent.
The last Gatha of Zarathustra was to his daughter and son-in-law. You realize that the Prophet himself talked about the importance of family and the role of the family in creating happiness. We seemed, with the loss of family, to have lost that joy in life which we were famous for once upon a time. We put up a proposal to create a Geo-Parsi program, and the whole concept of it and this little Pheroza, the happy Pheroza, Geo-Parsi, is to bring back that joy in life, to bring back the positivity.
Parsis are a community which have always been ahead of its time, a community which has flourished in all walks of life. The main reason the Parsis were able to achieve success was perhaps because they were able to follow the basic tenets of Zoroastrianism, which stress the need for having harmony and balance in life.
If one is a true Zoroastrian, both from the point of view of the principles of the religion as well as the practices of the faith, then you've got a formidable combination to be in harmony with yourself, and by being in harmony with yourself, I believe, you can be in harmony with the environment.
However, by the beginning of the 20th century, Parsis started giving material advancements and personal achievements priority over family life.
From the middle of the 20th century, in 1948, let us say, which was the turning point, indicated that the community's population trends were not very healthy. Family norms were becoming smaller, values were changing. With higher education and professionalism came a certain change in family patterns.
We realized it was the predicament of progress. We were dropping in numbers. We had become less than half our population. And the whole issue was, when we went into the field, we saw empty villages, homes without any people, or homes with only old people and no children. This was across Gujarat.
The imbalance between personal happiness and material achievements is true of all modern life, but comes with a psychological cost on a community level and in personal life.
Family ties have to be there. Otherwise you are individual, and in the long run, loneliness is a big killer. So if it is a big family, loneliness will never come. If it is a very small family, then loneliness, and you have to then rely on your friends to avoid that loneliness.
In my own case, there is no societal pressure. There was never social pressure on me. Obviously, parents were keen. My mother, especially, my father died. There wasn't that much on by him, but my mother obviously was very keen. But otherwise, there was no societal pressure. Marriage, you have to think of that. You may have a career, but you have to think of marriage. I face none of that.
It's very simple. Your total fertility rate is 0.88 or 0.89, less than 1. So less than 1 child per couple. And that's obviously going to decrease your population unless that trebles. So unless you have about, from Zubin's paper, unless you have at least 3 children per couple, you're not going to stabilize the population. So obviously you have to have more children as a community. And again, that makes sense because it's an aged community looking after parents and the elderly and grandparents. It always helps if you have more children.
Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the unique Geo-Parsi program was launched, a joint initiative of the Ministry of Minority Affairs and the UNESCO Parzor Foundation.
This community which is reducing in number, so encourage them to get married, to have more children, to participate in the normal life, and that was the government should intervene everywhere. I think wherever they feel that there is a weakness or they need some support, so government should interfere in a positive manner. One is to propagate them, one is to have them more children, to have more in number, and while they have more number, they should also contribute and participate in building a new India.
Thanks to the kindness of the government through the Ministry of Minority Affairs, we put up a proposal to create a Geo-Parsi program. And the whole concept of it is to bring back that joy in life.
So an essential part of the Geo-Parsi campaign was first, advocacy, and then, medical advice and intervention, accompanied by financial subsidy for that expensive medical intervention.
So although this is a community issue as such, we had to address and tackle and change individuals' opinions and beliefs in a way.
Let's not be morbid about it. Let's not be all serious about it. Let us use a weapon that the community uses very regularly, which is humor, and use humor as an opportunity to tell them facts about themselves and how they lead their lives. And I can say with actually great pride, it had a huge impact.
I had read the advertisement of Geo-Parsi in Jame Jamshed. As scheduled, we visited Dadar, the place which was given to us. Whatever doubts we had, that all got clarified, and within minutes we had decided that we were in that program. And today, by the grace of God, we will definitely become a parent.
Geo-Parsi has assisted individuals financially, medically and psychologically. But one more issue that the community has been facing is the need for cohesiveness and more social interactions among the youth of the community.
The biggest reason why it's difficult for me to find a Parsi bride is that I don't meet any Parsi women of my age because we are so spread out. And I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is start inculcating a system by which the Parsi children in a city meet up very regularly, not only for just religious instruction and cultural instruction, but as a social gathering.
After identifying the problem, the community got together and launched various initiatives, which are doing their bit to promote interactions among the youth, to change attitudes and recognize the rewards of family life. The results of these initiatives have already started to bear fruit, and most of the community is responding positively.
I was an only child. My husband was an only child. So we grew up with a very lonely childhood. So we decided early on, at least we'll have 2 children. So we had 3.
I have 3 children. The 4th one is is my pet, but she's as good as my child only. There's a lot of talk and debate going on about Parsis is a dying community and all. So I wanted to do contribution from my part of it.
The beginning might be small, but it's definitely a step towards the right direction.
Well, મને ઘણી ખુશી થાય કે તમે 37 બચ્ચાઓ પેદા થયા, તમે બળો પલો આગે પડો ને ખૂબ કામ કરો ને દેશની તરક્કીમાં તમારા સાથ હશે તો મને લાગે કે બહુ સારું થશે. અને અમારા પ્રાઇમ મિનિસ્ટર તો ગુજરાતી બોલે છે તો પ્રાઇમ મિનિસ્ટર બી ઘણો ખુશી થશે. મને તો ઘણી ખુશી થાય.
There is still a long road to be traveled for reviving the Parsi population, but it is a journey worth taking. And each step taken is a movement to recreate the balance and harmony required for a truly successful individual's life. A life which celebrates the joy of achievement with sharing and caring.
A question asked very often is infertility Parsi-centric? No, there is no evidence that corroborates that.
Before marriage itself, I knew once I got married I wanted a baby. But my husband was a bit skeptical, but I convinced him and he went along with me.
God has given a very strong instinct of reproduction and self-preservation.
For me, a marriage was not complete without a child. I was more keen on a baby than my husband. When she gave me my child in my hands, my son, for the first time, believe me, I just couldn't believe he's mine. I just couldn't believe he's mine.
Being a mother myself, I think that has been my calling since I was a kid. I mean, there are my cousins who said that you were like 7 years old, 8 years old, you would only play mummy, you know. But it's a journey worth taking because the experience, the enjoyment, the fun that you have, bringing up an individual in the world is something only when you take it, when you go through the journey, you can experience it. It's like the mango cow, like you eat a mango. You will only know how sweet or sour the mango is once you eat it. So that's exactly what parenthood is all about.
I had read the advertisement of Geo-Parsi in Jame Jamshed. As scheduled, we visited Dadar, the place which was given to us. Whatever doubts we had, that all got clarified, and within minutes we had decided that we were in that program. And today, by the grace of God, we will definitely become a parent.
The last Gatha of Zarathustra was to his daughter and son-in-law. You realize that the Prophet himself talked about the importance of family and the role of the family in creating happiness. We seemed, with the loss of family, to have lost that joy in life which we were famous for once upon a time. We put up a proposal to create a Geo-Parsi program, and the whole concept of it and this little Pheroza, the happy Pheroza, Geo-Parsi, is to bring back that joy in life, to bring back the positivity.
Parsis are a community which have always been ahead of its time, a community which has flourished in all walks of life. The main reason the Parsis were able to achieve success was perhaps because they were able to follow the basic tenets of Zoroastrianism, which stress the need for having harmony and balance in life.
If one is a true Zoroastrian, both from the point of view of the principles of the religion as well as the practices of the faith, then you've got a formidable combination to be in harmony with yourself, and by being in harmony with yourself, I believe, you can be in harmony with the environment.
However, by the beginning of the 20th century, Parsis started giving material advancements and personal achievements priority over family life.
From the middle of the 20th century, in 1948, let us say, which was the turning point, indicated that the community's population trends were not very healthy. Family norms were becoming smaller, values were changing. With higher education and professionalism came a certain change in family patterns.
We realized it was the predicament of progress. We were dropping in numbers. We had become less than half our population. And the whole issue was, when we went into the field, we saw empty villages, homes without any people, or homes with only old people and no children. This was across Gujarat.
The imbalance between personal happiness and material achievements is true of all modern life, but comes with a psychological cost on a community level and in personal life.
Family ties have to be there. Otherwise you are individual, and in the long run, loneliness is a big killer. So if it is a big family, loneliness will never come. If it is a very small family, then loneliness, and you have to then rely on your friends to avoid that loneliness.
In my own case, there is no societal pressure. There was never social pressure on me. Obviously, parents were keen. My mother, especially, my father died. There wasn't that much on by him, but my mother obviously was very keen. But otherwise, there was no societal pressure. Marriage, you have to think of that. You may have a career, but you have to think of marriage. I faced none of that.
It's very simple. Your total fertility rate is 0.88 or 0.89, less than 1. So less than 1 child per couple. And that's obviously going to decrease the population unless that trebles. So unless you have about, from Zubin's paper, unless you have at least 3 children per couple, you're not going to stabilize the population. So obviously you have to have more children as a community. And again, that makes sense because it's an aged community looking after parents and the elderly and grandparents. It always helps if you have more children.
Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the unique Geo-Parsi program was launched, a joint initiative of the Ministry of Minority Affairs and the UNESCO Parzor Foundation.
This community which is reducing in number, so encourage them to get married, to have more children, to participate in the normal life, and that was the government should intervene everywhere. I think wherever they feel that there is a weakness or they need some support, so government should interfere in a positive manner. One is to propagate them, one is to have them more children, to have more in number, and while they have more number, they should also contribute and participate in building a new India.
Thanks to the kindness of the government through the Ministry of Minority Affairs, we put up a proposal to create a Geo-Parsi program. And the whole concept of it is to bring back that joy in life.
So an essential part of the Geo-Parsi campaign was first, advocacy, and then, medical advice and intervention, accompanied by financial subsidy for that expensive medical intervention.
So although this is a community issue as such, we had to address and tackle and change individuals' opinions and beliefs in a way.
Let's not be morbid about it. Let's not be all serious about it. Let us use a weapon that the community uses very regularly, which is humor, and use humor as an opportunity to tell them facts about themselves and how they lead their lives. And I can say with actually great pride, it had a huge impact.
I had read the advertisement of Geo-Parsi in Jame Jamshed. As scheduled, we visited Dadar, the place which was given to us. Whatever doubts we had, that all got clarified, and within minutes we had decided that we were in that program. And today, by the grace of God, we will definitely become a parent.
Geo-Parsi has assisted individuals financially, medically and psychologically. But one more issue that the community has been facing is the need for cohesiveness and more social interactions among the youth of the community.
The biggest reason why it's difficult for me to find a Parsi bride is that I don't meet any Parsi women of my age because we are so spread out. And I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is start inculcating a system by which the Parsi children in a city meet up very regularly, not only for just religious instruction and cultural instruction, but as a social gathering.
After identifying the problem, the community got together and launched various initiatives, which are doing their bit to promote interactions among the youth, to change attitudes and recognize the rewards of family life. The results of these initiatives have already started to bear fruit, and most of the community is responding positively.
I was an only child. My husband was an only child. So we grew up with a very lonely childhood. So we decided early on, at least we'll have 2 children. So we had 3.
I have 3 children. The 4th one is is my pet, but she's as good as my child only. There's a lot of talk and debate going on about Parsis is a dying community and all. So I wanted to do contribution from my part of it.
The beginning might be small, but it's definitely a step towards the right direction.
Well, મને ઘણી ખુશી થાય કે તમે 37 બચ્ચાઓ પેદા થયા, તમે બળો પલો આગે પડો ને ખૂબ કામ કરો ને દેશની તરક્કીમાં તમારા સાથ હશે તો મને લાગે કે બહુ સારું થશે ને અમારા પ્રાઇમ મિનિસ્ટર તો ગુજરાતી બોલે છે તો પ્રાઇમ મિનિસ્ટર બી ઘણો ખુશી થશે. મને તો ઘણી ખુશી થાય.
There is still a long road to be traveled for reviving the Parsi population, but it is a journey worth taking. And each step taken is a movement to recreate the balance and harmony required for a truly successful individual's life. A life which celebrates the joy of achievement with sharing and caring.
A question asked very often is infertility Parsi-centric? No, there is no evidence that corroborates that.
Before marriage itself, I knew once I got married I wanted a baby. But my husband was a bit skeptical, and but I convinced him and he went along with me.
God has given a very strong instinct of reproduction and self-preservation.
For me, a marriage was not complete without a child. I was more keen on a baby than my husband. When she gave me my child in my hands, my son, for the first time, believe me, I just couldn't believe he's mine. I just couldn't believe he's mine.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to another Friday Forum. We are delighted to have Heta Pandit and Dr. Pheroza Godrej with us. You're going to learn a lot about Heta. She's done some remarkable things, from working with Jane Goodall on her first job, and a lot of other things, starting a tea plantation, working with a tea plantation in Munnar, and of course, protecting heritage across India. If I start reading out Pheroza Godrej's CV, it'll take us all evening. But may I just say a few things about her? She has, of course, founded the Pheroza Gallery. She is chairperson of the Museum Society of Mumbai, and of course, also of the Godrej Archives. She is also a good friend of Parzor. In fact, Sorabji Godrej was our first patron, and we were very honored with that. I have fond memories of my father telling me about breakfasts with Pheroza
He always was so happy to meet her. He was the first president of Parzor. So welcome, Pheroza and Heta. Thank you so much for being with us, Heta, and sharing so much. And now I'm going to hand it over to you. And I know we're going to have a fascinating evening with two great heritage experts and two wonderful women who have done so much for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, how do we start? Heta, me first?
You first.
Okay. So, is this your first slide, Heta? Family and early childhood?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So, let me start by saying you've really had an adventure in your life. And I'm looking forward to this Friday forum hosted by Dr. Shanaz Kama. And thank you for those very kind words. Shanaz, your father, yes, dropped in for breakfast over here. And his next stop from 40D Ridge Road was Raj Bhavan. So I have very fond memories of his visits to our home and meeting him elsewhere on other Parsi Zoroastrian forums as well. You know, Heta and I have known each other for a very, very long time. And she's significantly younger than me, but also a Midnight's child. I mean, I was really a Midnight's child, but Heta followed me quickly in the first half of the next decade. And Heta, I'd like to first say something about your family. I know you've lived in many parts of India and indeed abroad, as Shanaz mentioned. Do you think independence and nationalism, which was at its height when your parents were meeting and courting each other, did it have any effect or did it influence you in your formative years?
First of all, Pheroza, thank you for the introduction. And Shanaz, thank you for having me on this show. It's such a pleasure being with both of you and all of you. Thank you for joining us. You know, the first thing I realized about my own name was that it did not sound very Parsi in one sense. And then I realized there were other people of my generation. I was born 7 years after independence. Other people, other girls especially of my generation that had Sanskritized names or names that did not actually pinpoint what community they came from. This was a matter of pride for my parents. Every time Mom used to say, if somebody asks you who you are, first say you're Indian. There was such a nationalistic fever at that time, I think, as I was growing up. That's my dad, Baman, on the right, and my mother learning to play the violin. That's our Panchgani home, earlier called Abbas Villa, after the Nawab of Vai, because my parents had bought it from Dosabhais, a family from Pune. They had in turn bought it from Abbas Ali, the Nawab of Vai. So the name was Abbas Villa for a very long time when my mother was growing up in Panchgani. She was a very naughty child, so they had to actually rent the house and then finally bought the house in Panchgani to be able to send her to school across the road to St. Joseph's Convent. And later when we see a picture of the ancestral house in Surat, I will tell you a little bit more about how she grew up. And she only came to Panchgani when she was 6 years old, but she grew up in Surat. And we'll see the house very soon. These are this is my siblings, Jenna, my middle sister. And we grew up in officers' colony because my dad was in the government service. What happened was I was born in Pune. And in 1961, when Bombay presidency was split into bifurcated into Gujarat and Maharashtra, because dad was Gujarati speaking, they asked him to go to Baroda and set up the laboratory there. So we were moved from Pune on Adeshar Irani Road in a very surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles and all that, and suddenly transplanted to this very strange environment in the officers' colony that you see on my right in Baroda. Next, please.
Yeah,
And,
Heta,
yeah.
just, yes, I'm glad you brought up your name. Does it mean anything? Because my sister-in-law is named Smita. She's, of course, now Smita Godrej Krishna, which makes it very confusing for people, just as your name, and we'll hear more about the Pandit part. But Smita was named because she was born with a wonderful smile. And she was also born around independence in 1950. So Kuvarbai Vakil, who ran a school and who also helped us establish Udyachal, as you know, said, Anu naam to Smita Pujoya, because she's got a beautiful smile. Does your name have any such little history to it?
Yes, my name means affection. Comes from the Persian root Heta. Het means affection. So when my dad's friend Gordon Das Chokhawala saw me for the first time, probably in the hospital in Pune, he said to my mom, "Tane ganu het avech enu naam Heta Parsu."
That's interesting. But seeing your mother playing the violin, and I'm sure they danced the Blue Danube waltz like most of our parents did, plus with the Panchgani connection, where there was a lot of influence of the Baha'i faith, of Sufism. What sort of atmosphere do you recollect that was? We'll talk about communalism if we need to, but if you can reflect a little bit as a growing girl, as in your sort of pre-teens or early teens.
Yeah, that's my earliest recollections when I was 11 or 12 was probably, the house suddenly turning into a ballroom. And then there was an old gramophone, and their mom and dad would play the records on the gramophone, and they would dance, the ballroom dances. In fact, the first dance I learned from my dad was the foxtrot, and then the waltz and so on. But there was another side to our social life. Mom had a little bent, has a little inclination towards Sufism. And we used to have every once in a while a whole Qawwali night. All night, men and women would come and sing Qawwalis. And I still remember those faces, and I still remember those Qawwals. It was an absolutely amazing time for us. Absolutely amazing. So there was both sides to it. My mom also experimented a little bit with the Baha'i faith. But she never left her Zoroastrian faith also. But she raised us to believe in everything and to experiment with various faiths and various religions, understand what was going on in other communities as well.
And then, of course, as you said, you moved to Baroda and you joined the convent school. So here was a Gujarati-speaking girl with maybe a smattering of Marathi, since you were in Pune, and being sort of hijacked into this rather conservative, I presume it was a Roman Catholic convent. And
Convent of Jesus and Mary.
Could you tell us something about that?
I'm still in touch with it was a girls' school, and still in touch with 20 out of 40 of my school friends, which is something after all these years. It's a wonderful relationship with the nuns also. And the school, in fact, when Mom passed on some 7 years ago, my sister Jenna instituted a little seat for her, and we call it Pay It Forward. So we've left a little money with the school, with the nuns, and what they have to do is they have to give it to a child, and then that child, if he or she learns something, has to pass it on to somebody else, that knowledge, whether it's in music or dance or drama, because Mom was very good with drama and dance. She's taught
we saw the Bharatnatyam, and you were doing the dance of the peacock, and you got an award for that. Does your love for animals come from there, or does your love
I don't know, but
what came first?
Mom wanted me to be a professional Bharatnatyam dancer. So she was grooming me for that. Every vacations in Bombay also, she wouldn't let me have a, like a real holiday. She would send me for extra classes, training, all of that. She was very ambitious for me. And since the age of 11, of course, I wanted to be a writer. Dad wanted me to be a doctor and my brother to be an engineer. So it was quite a mix-up. But anyway, finally, I am doing what I like doing, what I wanted to do since the age of 11.
That's really fortunate that you had a combination of both worlds in your family. And I think most Parsis, we grew up that way. We grew up with an appreciation for the Western culture, and we grew up for a great appreciation of Oriental and Indian culture as well.
Sure.
I think that you talk about your mom and you talk about your aunts. And of course, I know you. Are you a family of strong women? Your grandmother, Ratanbai, was definitely a very strong woman.
Great grandma was the strongest, I think, because when all the men, her husband, her brother, all those men, her sons, 7 of them, all left for Aden, and they had set up a provision store, and they were looking after something called the Little Aden Salt Works. They all had business interests in Aden. These are picture postcards that my grandfather had sent back to mom when she was little. He used to come back one every year or every 2 years. So she hardly saw him as she was growing up. But why I've still kept these picture postcards, and I don't think anybody would even remember Aden the way it is, the way it was. And these are pictures. This is the landing stage. This is the Arab mosque, and so on. Now, in the absence of all the men in the house, the women ruled the roost in our family. So great grandma was the head of the household. Then these are my grandparents, Rustamji and Temina. I think this is their wedding day. And then this is mom on her Navjot day to the left. And this is my great grandma Gulbai. You can see how strong she, even to go to the bazaar, she would wear a gara and socks and shoes. And there would be an ikka, a horse cart with one horse. And she would say, chalo, gari nikalo, gari karo. And we had coachman and his entire family. The coachman was considered the most important staff member in those days. So she would even go to the market dressed like this. Can you believe it?
So does your rebellious nature come from your great-grandmother and grandmother? Because my next question is, what took you to Tanzania?
That's a long story, but I will stick to just the most important milestones in that story. My mother, this is our ancestral house in Surat, by the way, which is being looked after by my brother Dhanrumi and Yasmin and his family. And this is an older version of it. Later we'll see another a restored version of it. It's beautiful and is beautifully looked after by them. I hope they're watching the show. This is a house built in 1903, and it was built during the coronation year of Queen Victoria. So there's a crown on top. So as you know, we are quite the Anglophiles. All our homes have got pictures of Apri Rani, Apro Rajo, and King George, and so on. And to make matters worse or better, I even had pictures of Diana and Prince Charles's wedding, and then the next generation as well. This is great-grandfather Palanji Patel. And to the right is the Patel cottage now, recent times. It's been featured in a book that an architectural school, SEPT, has put out. So they had studied the house as an important architectural contribution to the architecture of Gujarat. Very, very beautiful house, and lots of little anecdotes and stories associated with the house. Now comes the architect. This is my great aunt Ratanbai, my mom's Huiji, who never married And Ratan Bai was the one who actually designed and built this house in the absence of all the men, because they were all in Aden. Look, they used to send the money, but they couldn't come down and actually build. Earlier, a house in the village in Siganpur Gam was a small ground plus 2-storied structure. So as the wealth came in, as the money came in, they wanted to build a bigger house. And there were 7 sons and 2 daughters, don't forget. So Ratan Bai, I believe, took a stick and drew the floor plan of this house on the ground in the dust. And that is how this house was built.
Sounds like the ruler of Abu Dhabi who squatted on the sands and took a stick and demarcated where the museums would be, where the mosque would be, when they were just coming out from their Bedouin culture into the 20th century about 60 years ago. Wow. So that's quite formidable that she also, well, that was the only way to communicate with masons and things like that if you didn't have architectural drawings. So we'll come back to architecture and its state of architecture today, not only in Bombay or in the hill stations or indeed in Goa, but definitely closer to this lecture in the areas where there are dominant pockets of Parsi Zoroastrians living. But I'm not going to let you get away with it. What took you to Tanzania? Tell us about your romance.
Sorry, I forgot. I was in love with the boy next door, literally, Prashant Pandit. And my parents were against it. His parents, not so much, reluctant, but not very much opposed to the match. And my mother, to distract me from this little romantic liaison of mine, sent me off to England, but to study statistics, to further my studies, advanced studies. And I, being rebellious, still am. I took my fees, I gave up my college. I moved from Birmingham, stayed with our family friends, in fact, my brother Dhanrumi's friends, and sent Prashant, who's now my ex-husband, but then my boyfriend, I sent him the money to buy a ticket and come to London. For some visa reasons or some reason, he couldn't get in. So I remember that my roommate at Chandu and Bharti's house, she had come from Tanzania. So I said to
I think Heta's...
she's hanging.
Yeah, she's hanging. I'll just send her a message.
Yeah.
I'll just send her a message.
Just when we get to the juicy bit.
Yes, I know. The romance. Just a second. I'll just call her. Oh, I think her electricity seems to have gone. She's in Panchgani, right?
I don't know where she is. I thought she was back in Goa for today's lecture.
Okay, let me just check. Abhini.
Shanaz, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You know what? We have the PPP with us.
Yeah.
She can just talk on her mobile.
Okay. Okay.
I'll just suggestion when there's a technical glitch like this. It's a bit
Yeah.
unfortunate, but she can please carry on with it.
Yeah.
So tell her
Tell
her we haven't reached Dar es Salaam as yet. We're still between London and Italy.
Okay.
I know.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah,
great.
we can hear you.
Great. We can hear you. So carry on your mobile, Heta, and then just...
No, I'm okay. I'm good. Let's carry on with it.
Good.
Okay. So this is what I did. So I said, let's go. So we went off to Rome for a little holiday, and Prashant did not want to come back to India. So to cut a long story short, we go off to Tanzania without any papers and no visa, nothing, land up at the airport, and somehow we meet this manager of Alitalia, and he says, come on, I'll get you out of here. You stay in this tiny little hotel and then look for your friend. And then the next day I walk up to this gang of Gujarati boys who were sitting on the parapet, and I said, I'm looking for Nainesh Patel. So this boy says, go to the Patel Club. Apparently all the communities there have their own clubs, Luana Club, Patel Club, and so on. Even the Parsis had a little group, not calling themselves Parsi Club, but they anyway had it. And we soon found Nainesh, and there we were. And I must say one thing about the Parsi community there, especially my good friend Shona Wadia and her husband Keki, that they welcomed us both and they made us feel so welcome in Tanzania. They helped us settle in. And soon I found that Rosie, my predecessor, wanted to go back to England. And with her, through her, I found Jane Goodall. And Jane said, you've done statistics, come and help me with the chimpanzee research. That's how I got into Tanzania and the chimpanzee research and following the chimps from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. This is Shona doing an achu-michu when we entered the little cottage that Jane Goodall had given us to live in.
Have you been back to Tanzania?
No, never. I
was fortunate to be there about 3 years ago.
Yes.
It's a beautiful country with wonderful people. You don't feel the racial discrimination once you're outside the main town. But unfortunately, the politics, if you stay, the more you stay away from it, the better, I think. So what happened in Paradise in Tanzania with you and Prashant? Did he also join you on the reservation, Jane Goodall's research center?
No, he only came there once. Well, lots of friends used to come once in a while. They would say, can we come? And I would take them there. And we used to, you see, because earlier 4 American students had been kidnapped. So Mwalimu, our president Nyerere, had forbidden us to stay there for more than 15 days at one stretch. So I could take people, but we couldn't stay longer than 15 days at the Gombe Stream Research Center.
What was it like with Goodall?
Oh, lovely. Yeah, you learn something new every day. And I used to follow the female chimpanzees and their babies because they moved slower. I learned a lot, actually. I learned so much about us, about humans from the chimps. For example, the mother chimp would often leave her baby chimps with the Masi, with her sister, like we do.
I was just going to say, like we do.
Like we do. She would just dump the kids with her sisters or her sister, and she would go off for a little, walk somewhere or to do a recce to see if there was any food or termite mound. And then come back with a tool in her mouth to fish for termites later.
Okay.
So a lot of planning that went,
Was your separation with Prashant the cause for your final parting?
Yes, that was the only reason. I would have stayed longer. But unfortunately, Prashant and I, our marriage was on the rocks and I didn't want to stay on. So I came back to India.
You couldn't have continued with chimpanzee research. So what did you do once you returned home?
This is, by the way, this slide is of my teacher, Mrs. Arnavas Habibala. And she's in Baroda.
In Pune, okay.
In Baroda. And she's still serving on 5 boards of schools, including a charity school. And her favorite person to discuss local politics is a vegetable vendor. So the best time to catch her is 11:30 because she says, "Amna bhaji wala aayo, mane discussion karvanu chai." So whenever I go to Baroda, I go and see her. But why I owe my writing skills and my talent spotting to Jimmy and Arnavas, because Jimmy had come as a substitute teacher once to our school. He was a banker, he used to work for a bank. And he gave us an essay to write. And after I had written the essay, he called me and he said, if you cultivate this talent, you will be a good writer someday. And I'm so grateful to them both. I hope they're watching.
I hope so too. And what is he? Is that a snake near him or just a rope?
No, that's a rope.
Oh, rope.
That's a rope.
He also had some wildlife inclinations.
No.
So when you returned, what did you do? You went into advertising, right?
I first tried to go to World Wide Fund. The slides are moving too fast, Martha. Can we go back a little bit? So what I did, Pips, is I tried to go to World Wide Fund for Nature. That's when I met Sorabji for the first time. And I was looking for something to do with wildlife. Even at the Borivali National Park, for example, study langurs or study the bonnet macaques or something like that. I thought I'd continue my Tanzanian work here. But unfortunately, things didn't work out, or fortunately. And Mom said to me, you can't sit and mope all day at home. Go find yourself a job, something to do. So through an uncle, I got a job in advertising in Ogilvy and Mather. And and my uncle said to me, he said, I said, I'm not qualified to be in advertising. He said, advertising doesn't need any qualification. So, no qualification is the qualification. So that's when I started writing. I was a copywriter with O&M for a year. Then I switched to Clarion. But while I was at O&M, I met with Ruth Krishna, whom you know also.
Yes.
So Ruth introduced me to my mentor, Shyam Chainani. And that's how I started writing and doing a few projects to save things through Bombay Environmental Action Group. That time it was, and Shyam actually introduced me to such beautiful places. I worked with Cyrus Gazda. I worked with so many lovely people at that time, bureaucrats, who were Dev Mehta, who were interested in preserving Maharashtra's heritage, built heritage and cultural heritage. I also met with the Yusufs, and my colleague Devi Goenka and I put together the Marine Museum. It's India's oldest maritime museum, with Sadashiv Gorakshakar's help, your help, and lots of help from the museum, from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. At that time it was called Prince of Wales, of course. And that's how we saved Murud Janjira Fort, we saved Kasa Fort, we saved India's oldest maritime museum, because the ONGC wanted to run riot over it, run roughshod over it and take it over. And
we had another great supporter, an Admiral Jal Khasidji.
Yes.
Great supporter, Admiral Jal. And you put up this slide of Murud Janjira. I think Begum Latif, Bilkis Latif had told us to go there and do a small study, because the Coast Guard wanted a bit of the action, and the shipbreaking people wanted a bit of the action.
Yes. And government of Maharashtra had put up a proposal to have 24 industries.
Yes.
On the coast, just across the water. So we managed to stop all that.
Yes.
And now, of course, I don't know what the Janjira Fort is like now. But
it's still it's now under ASI, both Janjira and Kansa. Okay. And in the lockdown, and when they lifted the lockdown, it was completely overtrodden with tourists. And as you know, there's very little water supply in the fort itself. Yes. So I think they opened it up in a bit of a hurry, without control, and they closed it down. I hope the next time they open the fort for visitors. Kansa you can't go to. But Janjira we visited, and the Adil Shahi tombs over there, we discovered a lot.
Yes.
I think Mrs. Latif was very instrumental with Jal Khasidji, and it was a memorable weekend.
True.
Yes. So,
and it is through Mrs. Latif Sorabji that I met Cyrus. Cyrus introduced me to the Indian Heritage Society. At that time, Mrs. Latif was the chairperson. I think
yes.
Cyrus was the honorary secretary. And that's how we got involved. And then Shyam said to me, why don't you take care of heritage and not get involved with anything else? And at that time, I said to him, believe it, I said, oh my God, no, please, Shyam, not heritage. I'll do anything else. He said, but I'm an environmentalist. And he said, don't be stupid. He said, it is part of the environment. Saving heritage is part of the environment. You are stopping people from going into the countryside and quarrying materials. So you're saving the environment. You're also preserving intellectual property by preserving the design that the old craftsmen have put into these houses. And you're also saving on building materials. These houses are organic, they are greenhouses. So don't think you're not part of the environmental movement when you join the heritage movement. That's when I met you. That's when we started working together on Indian Heritage Society. Yes.
And this was a memorable meeting at Godrej Bhavan. I don't know whether everybody recognized everybody. I'll start from the left, is Mr. Iconic J.R.D. Tata, having a discussion with Sorabji Godrej. Heta's listening on intently, and I'm next to Heta listening on intently. It's a wonderful structure we were trying to save. And you win some, Heta, and you lose some, don't you?
Yeah.
You like
some,
to say
even
something.
that's a learning.
Yes.
Shantinath Jain Temple was our biggest loss in Bombay. Biggest loss.
And Sayadri.
And Sayadri.
That is
two
the
very
state
big
guest
losses.
house. State guest house on Malabar Hill. But we had allies even then, Heta. I think you had a lot more in I am Kadri, who was going to put up a 24-story, 26-story state-of-the-art guest house.
Yes.
And I remember a similar sort of meeting like the one on the slide with Kadri and his son and Shimol, and gave a presentation. And as we left, we said, at least it's ground +2 and not ground +26. It did look a bit incongruous compared to the original Sayadri, because it's got a very Mediterranean look to it with arches and things. But it's a partially success story, and I think more you can talk about that because you're doing a lot in heritage. Shanaz is doing a lot in heritage in Gujarat, of how the structure of urban heritage and conservation and the heritage listings came up through enlightened bureaucrats like D.T. Joseph. Would you like to mention something on that?
Yes, D.T. Joseph, Jamshed Kanga, who was commissioner of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Bombay. They were so men of such great vision, and did not take long to understand what we were saying. So we were like one body, in fact. I personally never felt that, oh, they are bureaucrats, we are going with a proposal, we are going with an appeal. Because it was like going to see a friend, going to see, okay, now what should we do about this? Let's find solutions. Dev Mehta, for example, you'd say, let's find solutions through MTDC and so on. So it was really, I would call it a golden period in Bombay, a golden period, really.
Yes, we did have our battles, and Shanaz, don't give up hope. Heta and I took on the Bombay Port Trust.
Yes, please tell everybody about it.
You tell them how many times we called on the chairman, and we played on his little ego at the end, because his chairmanship was terminated one day just when we were getting into the conversation, and we were left with his chief engineer who hated us, who never let us step into the office. And then a few months later, he came back, and Heta told him in a very sweet way, sir, you'll be remembered by the citizens of Mumbai. They'll be forever grateful to you. And he didn't know what we were talking about. But that approach, understanding, feeling, the personal thing is what saved Evelyn House. And those who don't know where Evelyn House is, it's in line with the Taj Mahal Hotel. and it sits plonk. Heta, you talk about it.
It's right on the waterfront, and it's alongside the Taj, between the Taj and the Radio Club. And that everybody is familiar with that skyline and with that roofscape. And if you would suddenly, you put a high rise over there in the middle of this lovely row of buildings, it would have stuck out like a sore thumb. So we said that to maintain the aesthetics, to maintain the roofscape, and it's visible from so many corners, so many tourists, this was a pride of Bombay, just across the water from the boats that take you to Elephanta and so on. And everybody should enjoy this skyline is what we felt at that time. It is part of our history, part evidence of our lifestyles. And a house or a building is not just a bunch of stones and brick and lime and mortar and so on. It's also a capsule of the lifestyle of the people of a city or a town.
Heta, we'll take this up later, but you know, it's a recycling of a building. And I think Shanaz would like to talk about that later when we come into Navsari and Surat. But this was a building where there were only, Evelyn House, where there were only 4 families living. And the need of the BPT, the client, was we need to house more officers. So very intelligently and gradually, with a lot of persuasion, we said, okay, instead of 4, we can't put in 100, but how about 24 to 30 apartments in that same footprint? And I think that's what won people over, that they could use their property in a more creative way, fulfilling all the needs of our time, not when it was built in the 1930s.
Correct.
So why did you leave all this and run off to Munnar, which is already on our screen?
I think it was the 93 riots, Pheroza. I got caught in the riots. We were going to pick Mom up from the airport where she was landing from America. And my cousin Maruk and I were in the car in one little Maruti 800 going on our way to the airport. There were buildings being burnt on either side. And there were men who stopped our car in vests and lungis. So, and they asked us, "Tu Muslim hai ki Hindu hai?" We didn't know what the correct answer was because they didn't show us for who they were. So my cousin Maruk lifted her Ashofarohar and said, "Hum Parsi hai. Jane do, Bawaji hai, and they let us go." But it was a scary, traumatic night for us that day. Came back, Mom settled in, everything. But that was the day we decided, both Maruk and I, that we couldn't live in the city anymore. The fabric of the city had been torn. A lot of my Parsi friends were changing their names. Parsi surnames were being changed because they sounded Muslim to people who are not familiar. So I just felt that Bombay was not the same for us. And she also got caught again in the riots on her way to work in Shivri. So we decided. So we spoke to Shirin Barucha, a colleague in Indian Heritage Society. And Shirin said, "Why don't you go to Munnar and work for Tata Tea?" And she introduced us to Mr. Krishna Kumar. And we went there on a trial. We went there in October. We had a look at the place. We felt very welcome. And we said, we'll come back in January. We'll wind up things in Bombay and come back. And we did not know that we would be the first women tea managers ever in the whole world. That is one little fact that they forgot to tell us.
How did you manage?
Oh, beautifully, beautifully. They were so kind to us. This is a picture of the tea gardens in Munnar. I learned how to ride a bike there. And these little roads that you see traversing through the hills, we used to go up and down these hill slopes. This is my friend and Maruk's manager, Manjeet Singh, his daughter Himani. She was 5 years old when we were there. And this family and my own manager, Arun Maharaj, and his wife, Viji, they made us feel so welcome, and they looked after us so well. Initially, we didn't have bikes. So we were walking up to 11 kilometers a day, thinking that's what managers do, not knowing that we had a choice. And Manjeet one day at the managers meeting said, "Hello, do you realize that these girls are walking 11 kilometers a day something none of us have ever done. So the company gave us 2 bikes. Now, I didn't know how to ride a bike, so Maruk taught me over one weekend, and I was up on that bike on Monday morning. It was quite something. It was a learning experience. That's Manjeet and Himani at their Anumalai bungalow. After he retired, he was given an extension.
So what made you leave?
Unfortunately for me, I had a motorcycle accident. Instead, on a blind curve, I went straight into a jeep, and the footboard of the jeep went into my shin bone. I had to have surgery. There was a bag tied to my foot, to my leg for 3 months. And while I was resting, I was supposed to be resting, I asked for a car and a photographer. And I did the listing of all the tea garden bungalows. I was on crutches, but I would go in a car, go to the bungalows, and they had given me a photographer. And that's how I did the listing of the tea garden bungalows in Munnar. That led to, Shyam saw it, and Shyam said, let me speak to Ministry of Environment. And then finally, after I left, when I was in Goa, still in touch with Shyam and all of you, he got me a contract to do the listing of 6 districts around Munnar, around Idiki. So that was a fun thing. That brought out the first book, A Heritage Guide to Kerala.
Publication. That was your first publication, right?
First book. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you also do something on Mahabaleshwar?
Yes. So then that was some time ago. We did at Shyam's request. Whenever we got the money, we used to do a listing of Mahabaleshwar. We've done Panchgani. We've done Kolhapur. We've done Vai.
When you talk about this, yes, then please tell us later on how one can get buildings or structures or private homes gazetted and listed, because once you put it on paper, and I saw one of your chats yesterday, record it and get it gazetted. Whatever good things come our way, get them gazetted so that the next government, if there's a change in ministry, at least the record is there, and then it's harder for them to dispute it and remove it.
Yeah.
And is that what brought you to Goa?
No, not at all. In fact, after the accident, I came to Goa because one of my friends, Shirley, was visiting us in Munnar, and she said, after you leave, are you going back to Bombay? And I said, no, we don't want to go back to Bombay. We would like to go somewhere else, but we don't know where. So she said, I have a small flat in Kolva, or right across the church. Why don't you go there and figure things out? When we came to Kolva, and the first thing you could hear in the morning were the church bells and all that, and we just fell in love with Goa. Of course, I'd been to Goa many times on work, which Shyam used to send me on environmental impact assessments and all that. And Maruk also used to come for her garment export house work to Goa. So we were familiar with it, but we just loved it, and we stayed there. Sato Almeida, Teres Almeida, Babush Gudino, these were the 3 friends we had already. And through them, we started meeting other people. Sato put a huge pile of books under my nose, and he said, this is the Goa I want you to see. And there was Manohar Mulgaonkar's book and all the history books of Goa. And I realized there was more to Goa than just the beach and the parties and all that.
So that's what led to all these wonderful publications. And
Books,
you've been at it for 26 years, right?
26 years I've been in Goa. The first book was Houses of Goa that I did with Annabelle Mascarenhas. And that was, Babush introduced me to Gerard Dacunia. And I remember our first sale was, Pheroza, you supported our little venture.
Yeah,
we were
it's
so
a beautiful
thrilled
book.
with the order. Thank you. Still a classic, still a textbook actually, many colleges. And then came the Homi Bhabha Fellowship grant that gave me 2 years of a comfortable research time, where I studied the work of the master builders. Because, now we have architects and they all strut around with a little swagger. But I still feel that the real credit, the original architects were the master builders, the masons, the carpenters, the roofers. the floor tile layers, the lime plasterers, and all these people who set the foundation for good architecture, at least in Goa. So I wanted to document it. And thanks to the Homi Bhabha Fellowship Council, I got the grant 2 years, and I did this research, and I had two very good architects from the architectural college who helped me with the drawings and all of that. And we put all the craftspeople connected with the houses of Goa. So that came out in a book called Hidden Hands. And then,
Is that who took you to Bisholim?
Bicholim, yes, I did pottery, the potters in Bicholim, the brass workers and the iron metal workers in Mapsa, the basket weavers in Valpoi, all these places. And the interesting part was I learned that they were all related, all of them, the masons, carpenters, roofers, they would all be, the stone cutters, were all bullock cart owners, were all somebody's cousin. You know, so they had an understanding of the whole system. And I've studied Goan houses, and I feel they are greenhouses, they're organically built houses with natural material. They are built in harmony with nature, with the environment. And I can talk endlessly about the Goan house, but I'll come back to the other publications. I used to write a few things for the Navhin Times, which is our local newspaper. And one day my editor said to me, you know, we are lacking in fiction. Why don't you write a short story? So I wrote this story called The Snake Man, in which a man goes from village to village with a bunch of snakes. And finally, the queen cobra, whom he's very fond of, bites him and he dies in that snake cage. But that triggered something else off. And Manohar Shetty, who was also a Homi Bhabha fellow, said to me, can you translate Marathi? And I started translating Marathi for him. I translated over 50 stories for him. And I started writing fiction, and all those stories are in Dust and Other Short Stories from Goa. Mario Miranda, bless him, did the cover for me. And there are illustrations inside also. Then one of my friends who's a writer in denial, Nandan Kutcherkar, I hope he's watching this show. He said we should have a book on churches because churches have influenced the architecture of the houses. We can't talk about houses without talking about the churches. And though I'm not an expert on churches, I don't claim to be an expert. I wrote Walking with Angels, where actually I've compared the architecture, how it moved from old Goa to the villages, the church architecture, except for the Sioli church and the Saligaon church. Saligaon is where I live now. Except for that, all the other churches are influenced by the churches of old Goa, and the houses are also influenced by these churches.
What about your Parsi connection in Goa once more with Ashdeen's father?
Yes, that was the most, I mean, really, it's a small world. Because years later, when I met Ashdeen and I met his mom and dad come to my place in Bandra and they say, he said, Mr. Lilawala said, I've seen you before. And he said, you were sitting outside my factory in Bicholim when Maruk was working there. Maruk had a job with Wranglers and he was looking after Wranglers at that time. So that's how I made a double connection with Ashdeen and his parents.
Parsis are everywhere, Heta. We can't escape each other.
No, but you know, they've always been there for me, I feel. Yes. Always like a guiding hand or whatever you call it.
What about your own autobiography? You wrote that too. You were very young.
Then I started doing only a day's company. Yeah, so after Walking with Angels, there were other books. And I also stumbled upon the lovely songs that are grinding stories. My connection is okay. They are songs sung at the grinding stone. So I translated those from the original from Marathi to English. And that was published. That book I've dedicated to my brother because most of the collection in that is brother-sister songs. And also
Are
did
they
Houses
in
of Goa
Konkani?
tours with Varun.
Are they in Konkani?
No, it's a mix. Pheroza, it's a mix of Konkani and Marathi in this area. And if you can follow either, you're okay.
Can you draw parallels with songs that were sung or are being sung in the villages of Gujarat by Parsis or Zoroastrian?
Yes, yes.
Can you draw parallels?
Yes, yes. Songs at the grinding stone are sung in Gujarat. Sometimes the grinding stone has two handles where two women run the stone in relay. They also sit on a stool. Now in Goa, we are not permitted to sit on a part or a stool. We have to sit in a particular way. That is very, very important for the Goan the Goan lady who sits. And I mean, I won't go into details, but my research has taken me to such homes where they've discussed menstruation freely, they've discussed what is taboo, when you can touch the stone, when you can't touch the stone, how you put the virgin grain in, but you can't take the flour out with your hand if you're menstruating, stuff like that, where you can hold the stone, the handle on top or at the bottom, under what circumstances, how you have a relationship with the grinding stone when you walk from the kitchen to the patio or the courtyard, how you walk, how you approach. There's a relationship between the object, which is not just an object to them. And you have to sit with your leg out in a certain way. You cannot sit it's an insult to the stone. And for weddings, they sing happy songs, but normally for every day, they're quite sad actually, these grinding songs. Quite sad. They're, because some of our women were married off at the age of 7 and 8. Somebody should actually do a study of the status of women in Goa. Everybody thinks we, are very liberal and so on, but that's not the case. I think there might be a video here, Mata, of my two storyteller lady. Can we go back a bit? Is that video going to? Can we go back a bit, Mata?
Is this video?
Yeah. It's not a very good video, I'm afraid, but this is how they, Lakshmi and her cousin-in-law will sit at the grinding stone with the leg out. And if there are two women, they'll also sit with their leg out and sing to the grinding stone. And in very sad times, they actually consider the stone to be a confidant, like a best friend. So they'll sing to the grinding stone, not at it.
I see.
If you know what I mean. Yeah.
What is your latest project in Goa? I'm only pushing
working on
forward because of
okay, yes, we're running out
time.
of time. Okay,
yeah.
Next slide, please, Mata. That we can skip this part. This is my friend Clarice Paz's art exhibition.
No, why don't you? This is your latest project, right? You were just about to speak.
No. The latest project is I'm working on 3 books at a time. I've translated Grinding Stories Volume 2, where we have Catholic Gauda women singing songs at the grinding stone, which we never knew existed. So it's a new discovery for me. And also translated another book on objects and memories, the domestic objects that are going out of fashion because of electricity and mixers and all that coming into these village homes. So that's the second book. And the third book is Goan stories, stories from Goan houses. So there'll be about houses, but not just architecture. I've realized over 26 years that the house is only because of the people that live in it and the people that built it. So I'm going to concentrate more in this next volume on the people that inhabit these houses or built these houses, the stories that revolve around these houses. Now, the other thing that I do is I'm also chairperson of the Goa Heritage Action Group. And through the group, we try and campaign for things which we feel are very important. As all of you probably heard, there are 3 projects that are coming, destroying the moorland forest, and also 150 heritage houses along the railway track. Now, if you're running out of time, Shanaz?
This is a short video. I think short video.
Yeah, we must watch this. We must.
Yes,
Okay.
because
And
it will
then we
lead
can
you to,
And welcome to the Heritage Hotspots in Goa series.
So the
I'm
point
Heta
of the video is that there is not
chairperson of
threat.
the Goa Heritage
There's a
Action
threat
Group
from other
and
things
author
also.
of 9 books on Goan heritage. And today I've come to this lovely village in South Goa, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit of what I've just learned. As I always say, every corner you turn in Goa, there's something to learn. And even after 25 years, today I've learned from Dr. Barbosa, who lives here, that the Jesuits came and drained the water in this land, drained the marshes, and had various levels, I believe, where the church, the top was covered in trees, and then the final layer was the storm drain. Isn't that amazing? And after this water was drained from the marshland, there were certain ponds that took the water that was drained out. So you had everything. You had a hill slope with trees, you had a drain, you had a pond that took the water, and that is how the whole ecosystem was managed. Once that was done and paddy was found here, the houses started being built and people started moving to this wonderful place. Coconut groves and mango, chiku and paddy, and of course these heritage houses. Why am I here today? I'm here to tell you that these heritage houses are under threat. Threat from a double track railway line that our government of Goa, government of India, Southwestern Railway, in its wisdom has decided to put here, not even 10 meters away from the compound wall, but almost touching the compound wall and gate of this heritage house. You can imagine the impact this will have on the floors, on the walls, on the structure. Most of our structures are built with laterite stone packed with several layers of lime and mud, and therefore fragile. You cannot treat heritage homes which are 400, 200 years old like that. You cannot treat people who live in these heritage homes in such a cavalier, casual manner. My appeal to you today is, please join our campaign, express your solidarity through whatever medium you have, art, photography, writing, poetry, filmmaking, cuisine, whatever you do, architecture, engineering, whatever you do, even if you're doing nothing all day, please, once a day at least, find a way to express your solidarity with us and say no to coal, no to double tracking in South Goa. Thank you.
It's a wonderful message, Heta. Wonderful message. This affects all of us, development. So we come to one of the final chapters in our conversation today, how you re-envisaged Temi Terrace in Bandra. It's a beautiful bungalow. I visited it.
Thank you. We started with a plant nursery. I'll be quick about this because I know we're running out of time. And then through my job with the advertising, O&M, started getting offers to have film shoots, advertising ad films. So we started with that, and it's been 37 years now. Mom used to manage it when I was in Munnar and in Goa. And with the support of my family, of course, it's a family-owned house. We managed to keep it afloat, not just afloat, but we put it to adaptive reuse. So we've done things to the house that further the use of the house as a film location. And yet we have a space that we live in as well. So both you can have your cake and eat it too. These are two pictures. This is the back and the road fronting you've already seen. This is the flooring, which is, and here are some of the, here I'm showing off a bit with Irfan Khan, bless him, and Deepika, Kajol, Akshay. Akshay actually spent half an hour with mom when mom was bedridden. He's a very, very kind person, compassionate. And here's a little clip of a film that I'm sure you will all enjoy. With Baman Irani at our house.
You know, Rusu, when people think of us, they must be thinking small, closed community, fun-loving, food crazy, a little happy. Little do they know that we are modern, progressive, charitable, despite the fact that we have these ancient customs of feeding our dead to the vultures.
Grandpa,
Yeah.
one boy in my school said that all Parsis are statues.
That's not true. All Parsis are not statues. Only 98% of the Parsis are statues. 2% are getting there.
Yes. Another reuse of
another adaptive reuse is this. This is a picture of Jena Cottage in Panchkani that used to be the kitchen attached to the main bungalow. In the old days, they had a kitchen separate because of the wood smoke and so on. So in 1968, during the Koina earthquake, when the kitchen sort of one wall collapsed, Dad turned this around, and we now have a 2.5 bedroom apartment with furniture given by my cousin, Kersi and Zavera. I hope they're watching. And this house, both these properties. Next slide, please. We'll go a little quickly. The main bungalow and the cottage are both on Airbnb, and I've turned things around to accommodate guests here. We also often go and stay, and that is this is also I'm quite proud of it. This is a fine example of adaptive reuse. This is my brother's place. Believe it or not, it was a horse stable. From horse stable, it became gardener's cottage. From gardener's cottage, it became security cottage. I was living in one wing at one point of time. And then my brother Dhanrumi and Yasmin and family, they added a floor. They did not change the footprint of the original structure. They didn't want to. And they have this beautiful 9-bedroom house there. Now, from a stable. These are some pictures of the main bungalow. It was called Abbas Villa, as I was saying earlier, where Mom grew up, went to school, and this is now called Dhan Heta. Dhan after my brother, Dhanrumi, and of course me. Next, please. We'll go a little quickly. We also have a 1-acre plot on the right-hand side of these properties behind Jena Cottage, which is a forest. And my sister Jena and the rest of the family have decided to leave it as it is. So we get small animals there also. So this is like a private forest as well as a little sanctuary for small animals. Next, please, Mata. Next, please, Mata. Yeah. This is Diana, my youngest sister, her husband Aspi, and her 2 sons, Meenu and Farad. Farad is looking after the shoots and the Bandra house, in fact. And Diana, I must very proud of her. She has kept this craft of crochet and toran making alive in her own way. She was always very good at embroidery, and this is something I had to showcase on this show. So whatever designs you have, please keep them alive by making re-adapting them to modern use. Don't let them go. These are torans that she has made, Diana has made herself. Even if you have a very big toran, for example, use the design to make a smaller one because now the apartments are smaller. That sort of thing.
Lovely.
You know, it's been so interesting seeing your adaptive reuse. And yesterday when we were talking, Pheroza had a brilliant idea about adaptive reuse in Surat. Surat, why don't you share that with us when you were talking about the house that the tough great aunt built? Pheroza, you had a very good idea.
Heta.
No,
Yeah.
Pheroza, you tell us what you thought. And then we'll consider. Then we'll consider.
Well, homestay is really very important. That way you get to, as Heta has demonstrated, there are many things. If it's a very large house, it's extremely difficult to maintain. There are a couple of things you could do. You could turn it into a residential place where training is given to the community, not necessarily to the Parsi community, but to the larger community, to teach girls sewing, teaching them early childhood education, approaching the government, the local government, for a grant to initially maintain the place, because funding is very, very tight, just to keep the place secure. Or homestays, as you, Airbnb is very popular. Another thing, there are so many of our diaspora who live in different parts of the world. I'm specifically referring to the North American diaspora, where it is summertime. They send their children here for Navar Martab. They want to do the final ceremony. Some of them are in the Surat madrasa, some of them are in the Bombay madrasas. And if it's a large enough home, you can have your homestay in Surat and be near your child while they're going through the religious ceremonies. Another thing, weddings and navjots can also take place indoors. When they come in the monsoon, it's impossible to have an event in a bagh because they're all open air. And if it's a small function, it can be done in these restored homes. For people can stay for 10 days, 12 days, enjoy the local cuisine. And that way you can maintain your property as well. And if it can be thrown out again to the larger community in Surat or Navsari or Udwada already has something going for it, I believe. But it's a very easy way where you can have your cake and eat it too. It's the initial investment. And I think Heta's entire family has proved that this can be done. And if you work in harmony with each other, and if you're not concerned about, and you'll save people from encroaching onto your property if you don't really live there. You know, many people have sold their homes. Well, if they sold them, they've sold them. But if they've locked them up and gone away and left it in charge of a caretaker, many times a gardener, Mali or someone like that, you never know what condition you'll find it in one day. So this way, small properties, large properties, you can have a goal to eventually achieve something like that. And there are places in Navsari, I was very happy to hear from Shanaz, and I would really appeal to everybody listening to this talk that the grand old man, Dadabhai Nauroji's, it's one of his residences in Navsari. It was crumbling, and two gentlemen have purchased it and are really wanting to do something with it. And
this is the house. So Heta and Pheroza and everybody who is watching, this is something our community and the country needs to save, especially since exactly 100 years earlier, 1922, Gandhiji made a speech at this well just outside Dadabhai Nauroji's house. And the Debu brothers, Dara and Kersi, have very kindly saved the house. But we really need to restore this property and make it a small museum or something like that. And there's another beautiful property which I'd like to share with both of you and the audience, because this reminds me of your Surat house somehow, Heta, the outside, and look at these lovely railings and the roof. But unfortunately, this is also a trust property. The trustees have very kindly allowed us to share the photos today, just to show the community and India that there are these beautiful homes. This is on the main street in Navsari. It's got a little garden around it. And the sad part is that we don't know how to revive it. And it was meant to be a community hall. So this is something which I really appreciated Pheroza talking about, doing navjots and things like that in a place like this. So please do think about this, both of you and everybody else from the community, as well as the architectural community who's watching, because there are so many beautiful homes. One of my dreams is to have a Parsi heritage tour from Diu to Daman, right to Dhanu, right around the coastline.
Lovely idea.
So many beautiful homes. There's lovely food. There's lots of tadi, which is our happy alcohol, and there are nice things to eat over there. So there are lots of questions. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask you all some questions, please, because we're over time. Bharat Avlani has asked Heta, of all the places you have stayed, which has the most stories, anecdotes, memories?
I think the Panchkani house has the most memories because my mom shared a lot. My grandmother, I didn't ever meet my great grandma or anybody who could share anecdotes. They were only handed down from those ancestors to my mother. But the direct stories were from my mom. And hers was like, one I remember was when she used to go to school in Siganpur when she was 4 or 5 to the village school. She said she was given a pair of shoes to wear to the school, but she would hide the shoes in her theli because none of the other children had shoes. So she felt very odd, awkward, and embarrassed. She would hide the shoes in her bag, and I found stories like that very touching.
Well, you have to write these stories, Heta. You can't write stories about Goa and not write stories about Parsis. We are not all crazy mamas. You have to write stories about us. There's a people watching you from Kuala Lumpur, from Australia, and Dr. Karishma Kuka has asked you that it's a very inspiring idea to dedicate a family home to a good positive event. It's a very valuable idea. And from Iran, we have from Hekmat, who's also, by the way, a heritage person and a museum expert. He says it was a very informative conversation. So I think yes, I've got more support for my appeal for your stories from Nina Bhatena. And Rayu Golaf is saying, I'm from Surat. So there are lots of people watching you from all over. So Pheroza and Heta, please, if you have anything more to share, do tell us. I'm sorry we couldn't run the clips, but we'll need to do another session, I think. And of course, we're going to catch Pheroza again and Heta. When you haven't sung Ghum Re Ghanti Ghum Ghum, that you have to do. Yes, come on, that you have to do. I'm sure lots of us can sing that with you.
I can't sing to
Come
save
on,
my
no,
life.
no, please, you have to. The grinding stone story, we have to.
The thing is, as I was saying, the grinding songs are sung in Gujarat and they're sung in Maharashtra and Karnataka. And the Parsis, of course, must have adopted it. And we only sing the happy ones. Now, I attended a wedding recently. My niece got married and they didn't have a grinding stone to sing to. So they got this little mortar and pestle, the kalbatto. And they did this Gum re ganti gum gum, gum re ganti gum. Jinu daru to koi nahi khaye, jaru daru to koi nahi khaye, jinu daru to uri uri jaye, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. Actually, there's so much that you know, both of you, and there's so much we need to do. And I know that the two of you, I saw that picture of the two young Heta and the young Pheroza, and it's been a long journey. And you've been very, very good at that journey. You stayed the course. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's very difficult at times. It's very difficult at times. There are lots of people who are writing to you from Kuala Lumpur. Bharat Avlani, what a beautiful treat. I've interacted and met Dr. Jane Goodall, spent time in Zanzibar and Tanzania, and at the MRA Center in Panchgani. Warmest greetings from Kuala Lumpur. Hope to see you here. And lots of other thank yous. Enjoyed the singing. So you can sing. Thank you so much, both of you. It's been a wonderful evening.
It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Really, really been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. All of you for watching.
Thank you so much, everybody who's been with us. Please join us for our Friday forums regularly. There are lots of interesting things and lots of interesting people whom you are going to meet. God bless. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Shanaz.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
Mata,
Heta.
and
Bye.
the team.
See you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks to
Mata,
the,
and thank you, Geo-Parsi.
Thank
yeah,
you, Mata.
thank you. And the technical team.
Yes.